Hello and welcome to this webinar about data in Europe for research into poverty. It's been organised by CESSDA. I'm Jen Buckley and I work for the UK Data Service, and I'm going to be joined by two speakers today. We've got Emilio Di Meglio from Eurostat and Professor Christos Papatheodorou from the Pantheon University of Social and Political Sciences in Athens. Okay, so in this webinar we'll be discussing data available to measure and research poverty and its effects in Europe. Here's an overview of the webinar. I'm going to start with a brief introduction and talk to you about CESSDA and give an overview of some of the key sources of data on poverty, and I'll finish with some information about how to find and access data through national data archives in Europe. Then we have Emilio. So Emilio is responsible for data production at the Directorate of Social Statistics in Eurostat. And he's in charge in particular of the EU SILC, the EHIS, the HBS and the TUS. And he'll speak about the microdata collection available at Eurostat with a particular focus on the EU SILC. Finally, we'll have Professor Christos Papatheodorou, who will discuss the potential and challenges of working with data relating to poverty based on his own extensive experience of researching poverty in Europe. There'll then be an opportunity to ask questions. So to ask a question, you'll need to type it into a questions box, which is part of the webinar control panel. And this panel is normally to the right of your screen. If you can't see the control panel, you may need to click on a red box with an arrow in it, which will maximize the control panel. You can type questions at any point, but we'll pick them all up at the end of the question and answer session. These questions can be kept anonymous, so don't feel shy. And throughout the webinar you're muted, so we can't hear you. We'll also provide a number of things to help you get the most out of the webinar. So afterwards we will send you a copy of the slides. And we've also put together a short guide with some summary information about the data sources that I'll be mentioning. And we'll send this out with the slides too. And then afterwards we hope to add a recording and all the materials onto the CESSDA website. So this webinar has been organised by CESSDA, which is the Consortium of European Social Science Data Archives. And CESSDA aims to enable the research community to conduct high quality research. And key tasks underlying this vision include developing standards and best practices around the management and archiving of social science data, and also facilitating access to data resources, including the development of tools that make it simple to both deposit and access data. And it also provides training in topics such as research data management and data discovery and reuse. The core operational bodies in CESSDA are national data services and archives. So you may be familiar with the data service in your country or some of the larger data services that exist. These organisations provide access to extensive collections of data useful for social and economic research. Each archive's collection is unique, but quantitative data is most common, particularly data from social surveys, but many archives also contain qualitative research outputs. Sources of data can include major collaborative studies, official government and policy orientated research, and also small research projects from individual researchers. Collections can be include current data and also older data collections. Now I'm going to talk more about finding and accessing data from social science data archives in a moment. So moving on to discuss data on poverty, I'll start with national and cross-national statistics. So poverty has a high profile in the policy context. So, for example, one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals is no poverty, and likewise the Europe 2020 strategy has one of the 5 headline targets is the aim to lift at least 20 million people out of risk of poverty or social exclusion. And so consequently, we've got many statistics and reports produced by statistics institutes, governing bodies and intergovernmental organisations. The European statistics, Eurostat, is a key source. So Eurostat is the statistical office of the European Union, and its report monitoring change over the long and short-term periods. In relation to poverty, Eurostat's key indicator is people at risk of poverty and social exclusion. which Eurostat constitutes using 3 sub-indicators, which are income poverty, very low work intensity, and severe material deprivation. Through the Eurostat website, you can access aggregated statistics, including people at risk of poverty or social exclusion, income distribution and monetary poverty, living conditions, and material deprivation. And results are presented both as tables and also as more flexible multi-dimensional data sets. At the national level, national statistics institutes such as the UK Office for National Statistics or Statistics Netherlands compile data relating to poverty, including data from individuals relating to income, receipt of benefits, and expenditure. They often publish extensive reports and statistics and aggregated data. In many cases, these reports come from the same sources as Eurostat statistics, as national statistics institutes collect data on behalf of Eurostat. You can find a list of statistical institutes on the UK Data Service website. And final source of macrodata to highlight is the OECD, who make lots of data available on their website. So for instance, the OECD Social and Welfare Statistics Database provides annual data for 34 OECD countries on topics including benefits, family allowances, social stratification and grouping. I'll now move on to discuss some of the key sources of microdata. So this is data at the level of individual people and households. So statistics and macrodata on poverty and related topics often come from aggregated individual level data collected via social surveys. For example, Eurostat's main source for the compilation of statistics on income, social inclusion and living conditions is the EU Statistics on Income and Living Conditions. And as we'll hear from Emilio, Eurostat have other sources of microdata too. So surveys are also conducted at the national level, so many are done by statistics institutes. This includes surveys that contribute to the EU SILC. So for example, in the UK, the Family Resources Survey collects the cross-sectional elements of the EU SILC. The survey itself is conducted on behalf of the Department for Work and Pensions by a consortium that includes the Office for National Statistics. At the European level, another useful survey is Eurofound's European Quality of Life Survey. So this is a cross-national study that's carried out every 4 years that examines both objective circumstances of European citizens' lives and also how citizens feel about those circumstances of their lives in general. There are also many academically driven large-scale surveys, so this includes the really valuable household panel studies such as the German socioeconomic panel study, the UK's Understanding Society and the Swiss Household Panel Study. So fortunately, considerable amounts of microdata can be accessed for research, so organisations collecting data might make data available directly, such as Eurostat, or via a data repository or archive. So for instance, the UK Office for National Statistics makes lots of microdata available from large-scale surveys through the UK Data Service. So some of the variation in who collects data and where it can be found can make it hard to find what's available. So we've put together some information for studies that we've mentioned in the guides. And you can also find out information about access to microdata for research on the websites of statistics institutes. I can also highlight 2 other websites that are useful for locating information about microdata from official statistics. So first there is MISI. So this is the Microdata Information System. This is an online platform that provides metadata for microdata sources of official statistics that are available for scientific purposes. You can find study and variable level metadata as well as reports and tools for data handling and analysis. There is also CESSDA, which stands for Centralising and Integrating Metadata from European Statistics. CESSDA gives an overview of official microdata disseminated for research purposes by national statistics institutes across Europe. So in both cases, these websites sort of describe data and the procedures for requesting data, but there's no direct access to data itself. Another source of microdata to highlight is the Luxembourg Income Study. So this collects and harmonises socioeconomic microdata sets from upper and middle income countries and makes them available in 2 databases. This website includes information about the data and the access arrangements, and also provides details of some current research that's based on the data. We also find that increasing volumes of academic research data is being deposited in social science data archives, and this includes both quantitative and qualitative studies. So an example from the UK relates to the seminal work of Peter Townsend. So he reported pioneering research into poverty in the United Kingdom. And Townsend's original research data is now available via the UK Data Service. A more contemporary example is the Everyday Experiences of Poverty study in Finland. So in 2006, researchers organised a writing competition titled Everyday Experiences of Poverty. They collected and archived over 800 submissions on the conditions and experiences of poverty in Finland, which covered themes such as coping with daily life, with little money, how to manage, pay the rent. And the research developed further in 2012, when selected participants of the 2006 competition were invited to describe their life and experiences relating to poverty or overcoming poverty in the time since 2006. The data collected in this study can be compared with the 2006 responses using some identification numbers. And the data set's available to researchers, but it's only in Finnish. Finally, the many general social surveys operating often include questions about poverty and related topics. So this includes large cross-national studies. So for instance, Eurobarometer surveys have often included questions relating to perceptions of poverty and social exclusion. The International Social Survey Programme runs a module on social inequality, and the European Social Survey includes a module on welfare attitudes. Also, in many countries there are ongoing public opinion surveys, such as the Elbus, with the German General Social Survey, the Swedish SAM surveys, or British Social Attitudes. So access to cross-national studies varies. So some are via dedicated portals, such as this one for the European Social Survey, and others, such as the International Social Survey Programme, or via the catalogues of the National Data Archive. So I've mentioned data held by social science data archives quite a lot, and so I'm going to just finish off this first introductory part of the webinar by talking briefly about finding and accessing data from social science data archives. So to help you find data, national data services have websites with online catalogues like this one for the Swedish National Data Service. You can search using terms such as poverty, and sometimes you can browse by topic. With large archives you can get many results, but usually you can sort and refine searches. So for example here I've filtered for survey data. Websites and catalogues are mostly in national languages and English. However, the actual data and documentation might only be available in one language. If you find you don't get any results, one strategy is to think about your search terms. So for instance, data useful for examining poverty might come from studies not specifically focused on poverty. So for example, research examining in-work poverty, you may want to focus on identifying data of employment and then checking if you can identify respondents' income level or some other indicator of poverty. There is now also the CESSDA data catalogue. So this is a new tool, and it allows you to search across all CESSDA member archives with features such as free text search and ways to sort and filter results. The results will include a summary of the data and a link to the relevant archive. You can also access this catalogue from the CESSDA website, along with information about the individual European social science data archives. Once you've found data, how to access it and get started. So the access arrangements vary a bit across the different data services and also across different data collections. So here are a few of the arrangements you might come across. So first, there are some open data collections that any type of user can download without registering. But usually you will need to register with the data service before accessing accessing data, you may also need to register the use of data. You will usually be agreeing to some terms and conditions as part of the registration process or when accessing data. So common terms and conditions include not trying to identify individuals, households or organisations in the data and not distributing data to others. Some restrictions about the use of data are also common, so that data might only be for non-commercial use only. Often you can just download data directly from the catalogue, however some services might ask you to complete a form to request data. In some cases, getting permission from the data owners can equal an additional stage in the application process. You'll also find that more strict applications operate from data collections that are considered to contain sensitive or confidential information, and access may be prohibited for users outside of the country. To facilitate access to confidential data, some services will operate a dedicated safe room or access via remote services. Access to data documentation and metadata is generally free, but charges can apply for commercial use and also for supplementary services such as burning data to a CD. You should find the access conditions clearly displayed in the catalogue record. And finally, the secondary data analysis. You need to make sense of the data, so finding out what information is collected from whom, when and where. And you should find this information in the catalogue record and also supporting documentation, which might include user guides, survey questionnaires, interview schedules and fieldwork notes. So documentation is often accessible directly from the catalogue as fully searchable PDF documents. So the format and quality can vary. If you're unsure when trying to find or access data, contact the relevant data service for help. So we'll now move on to hear from Emilio, who will speak about the microdata collection available at Eurostat with a particular focus on the EU silk.
Yes, thank you. Hope everybody can see properly my slides and hear my voice. So I will introduce what are the microdata collections that are available at Eurostat. It's several collections of anonymized microdata, a bit more description on USILK, what you can find in USILK, and so on. We have, for scientific purposes, European Statistical System microdata. There are several collections. You can see here 12 data collections. We have the ACHP, which was discontinued a few years ago, the Labour Force Survey, the Community Innovation Survey, the EUSILK, which is the European Union Statistics on Income and Living Conditions, the Structural Learning Survey, the Adult Education Survey, the European Road Freight Transport Survey, the European Health Interview Survey, the CVTS, Continuing Vocational Training Survey, the Statistics on Information Society, ICT in our jargon, Micro-Moment Dataset, and Household Budget Survey 2010. And we are working on making available also the 2015. This will be a little bit a percentage of the share of which microdataset were most used by the researchers in the last few years, and you can see that the largest share is USILK and LFS, with more than 50% of the requests, even if this data is updated to 2017. Files. And I will give you later the address where you can find it. So the statistical use files are accessible only by statistical office, and they are our production files. Then secure use files can be accessed only on site. For some data collection we have all this option available for accessing. After the procedure you get to access our secure room and use these files. The scientific use files until a few months ago were still transmitted via DVD. Now we transfer them to the researchers that made that request approved, via an FTP transfer over the internet. And then the public use files are available on our website, with or without subscription. So you can see that for some files they are secure use files. The criteria is that you need to have an approved research proposal, and you can only access them in the Research Safe Center. Only direct identifiers are removed, and they are highly confidential, and that's why they are only available in our Research Safe Center. Then we have the scientific use files, all except N&B collection, which are only for approved research proposals. You can use them at your office, at your university. You will receive them via a secure internet transfer. They are partially anonymized data, still confidential. Identification of respondents is still may be possible, but very difficult. Concerning the public use files, mainly Circle, FESSDA, lately also some more data sets are added. The access is public, the data are fully anonymized, but the identification of respondents is impossible. But of course, these data sets have such a heavy anonymization that is then very difficult to make good analysis out of it, and they are mostly for training purposes. You get an idea of what is inside, but then if you want to have a more detailed data set, you have to ask for the scientific use files. And I will tell you in the next slides how you do it. So step one, you need that your research entity is eligible. So it's a process that allows you to make your entity, your university, your research center recognized. And if it's eligible, for asking access to metadata. Everything is regulated by EU regulation, where all the details are written. If you type in Google EU regulation access to confidential metadata, you will find it. Then there are concrete, once your institution is considered eligible, you submit a research proposal, and Eurostat and the National Statistical Authority evaluate if the request for access is well justified. And the member state has 4 weeks to say yes or no to this research proposal. Eligible research entities have to have these characteristics. They have to be research entities, so they have to do research in commercial companies, for example. They have to make the results public. They have to be independent, and they have to comply with certain safety requests. The proposals, the scientific purpose of your research proposal should be well described, and you need also to justify why you need access to microdata, what will be the value added of using microdata to your research. You have to commit that the research results will be made public in some way, and that data security measures are in place to protect the confidentiality of the data. So when we receive a research project proposal, Eurostat metadata access team does an initial check, and then the technical units, in the case of UC, for example, our unit, just checks if the metadata is appropriate for the planned research. For example, if the variables that you ask are all there, and if the whole thing technically makes sense. We don't go into the merit of the proposal. We just see if it makes sense, and if we have the data available for that kind of research to be proposed. And then it goes to member states, which have 4 weeks to reply. These are the number of research proposals we received in the last 4 years. So we see an increasing number. It's updated at mid-2017, so that's why you see 2017 is smaller, but in fact it's, the final data for the final result for the 17 is similar to the 15 and 16. So we have about 350 requests per year, more than half of them concern USEEK. Now I move to tell you what are the main research subjects that we receive, that we see around for USEEK. So mainly economic studies. Then we see people wanted to evaluate the impact of the crisis on household situation. Income, ethnic, geographical inequalities, labor market studies, EU poverty, mobility in Europe. A lot of requests also concern Euromod, which is a micro-stimulation model based on USEEK data, wages and income, well-being, housing, and youth. You will receive the presentation, so you will have a link here where you can, to the place where you can find the public use files for USEEK and RFS, which are available for most countries. So following this link, you will find the page with the public use files that are downloadable. Like I told you, are smaller, highly anonymized files that are mainly useful for training purposes. Now I move to the focus on USEEK. I will just tell you a bit more on USEEK, what you can expect to find inside, what it is, and so on. So USEEK is EU statistics on income and living conditions. USEEK is the abbreviation for this, and it's currently the reference source for comparative statistics on income distribution in social inclusion in the EU. It's a sample survey where we have about 5,000 households, in average 5,000 households per country, conducted in 35 countries. It has a cross-sectional and longitudinal component. The cross-sectional is pertaining to the current year, and the longitudinal component gives you information about the same household and the same persons over the 4 last years. So you have a 4-year panel, rotational, and a cross-sectional. And every year, more than 200,000 households and 500,000 persons are interviewed for the USEEK survey. So as I told you, we have annual data and longitudinal 4-year trajectories. We have information at the household level and on the individual level. The main part of it is income and tax data. Then we have many variables in material deprivation, on housing conditions, on employment, on childcare, on health, education, and also every year we have an adult module. There is no common questionnaire, there is no language in USEEK, but rather an output harmonization, meaning that Eurostat, together with the member states, define the target concept, the target variables to be measured, a standardized output in format and content, and we issue common guidelines that then are monitored by Eurostat. Every year there is an ad hoc module, meaning roughly 20 more variables each year that are on ad hoc subjects. And we have had in 2005 and 11 intergenerational transmission of poverty, in 2006 and 15 social participation, in 2007 and 12 housing conditions, in 2008 over-indebtedness and financial exclusion, in 2009 and 14 material deprivation, 2010 inter-household sharing of resources, in 2013 well-being, in 2016 access to services, and in 2017 health and children health. 2017 has just been disseminated to the researchers in these days, so researchers are receiving these days 2017 data for 26 countries. We still are waiting for 2 countries to send data later this month. The ad hoc module variables are included in the cross-sectional data, and there is an EU regulation for each module. So as I told you, there is a national flexibility for implementing USEEK. The source is survey or registers, especially for the income. In some countries, especially in the Nordic countries, registers are used, while in some other countries there's full interview, so no registers are used. The fieldwork it depends on countries, but is more and more concentrated in the first part of the year, but it can also be continuous in some countries. The income reference period is a fixed time in most countries, meaning 1st of January, 31st of December of the year before, except for the UK and Ireland, where it's moving 12 months around the date of the interview. then income variables are fully imputed. And there is a national flexibility also on the survey design, meaning that the countries choose the survey design that is more convenient for their geographical situation. The data are received and are disseminated as 4 files per country, and there are 4 linkable files. We have basically the register of household, the D file, and the household data file, H file, the person register, the R file, and the person data file, the P file, Y register and person. And the data file within the register, we also have some information on people that did not reply. So the register is, even if only the data about people that replied are then disseminated. But they have a register with basic information and then a data file, and you can link these 4 files and the instructions how to do it. EU-Silk is currently undergoing a revision, so we are trying to modernize it and to make it more respondent to user needs. And the revision concerns the content. We are going towards modular data, meaning that we will have repeated modules every 3 years, every 6 years, and the nucleus of variables that are repeated every year, and some slots for new policy needs. Then we are putting a specific accent on the timeliness because our users want data more and more quickly. So we have had already some improvement, but we would like in the future that data for year end, let's say data for 2021, for example, arrive by the end of 2021. So that's our aim at longer term. Some change in methodology, especially for precision requirement, and some changes in the longitudinal components. In particular, we would like to have a 6-year long panel instead of 4 years. So negotiations are now ongoing with the countries, and especially because it's a regulation of the European Parliament and the Council. So we'll see after these negotiations what will be the result, but mainly we are working along these 4 lines. So that's all from me. Thank you for your attention. On the slides that you receive, you get also my email address in case in the future we have some further questions. Thank you very much, and I give the floor back to the organizers.
Thank you, Emilio. So we'll now move on to Christos with the researcher's perspective on the potential and challenges of working with data related to property.
Okay. Well, I have first to apologize to attend the seminar because my PowerPoint is somehow incomplete because I wanted to add some figures, but due to some emergencies, it was not able for me to do it. I'll do it by the end of this day, and Jenny, you might circulate the new presentation to the seminar participants. Well. Now, for those working on poverty for a long time, like myself, since the mid-90s, the availability of the data today make us feel like a kid in a candy store. I mean, huge data, huge information on micro, macro data, whatever, which was not there back in the late 80s and early 90s. However, still there is room for improvement on the amount of and the quality of the available data and information, as well to the access of this data. I mean, Jane and Emilio presented all these huge opportunities that researchers have to access data on income, poverty, well-being, inequality, whatever. Now, over the last 3 decades, there has been a significant improvement in available information data related to social, economic, and living conditions of the household in the EU countries. European Commission and Eurostat contributed on this matter. Contribution on this matter was vital and should be acknowledged. I mean, for those who are working on making comparative analysis on poverty or inequality in Europe, remember that it was quite hard to do it before the first surveys conducted by Eurostat, which is the ECHP, back in the mid-90s. Access to estimation data, microdata and metadata had largely improved. most of the researchers can now have relatively easy and free access not only to rich databases with large amount of estimates indicators, but also to the macro data. And this has allowed researchers to investigate various aspects of economic inequality and poverty and deprivation, and has been particularly helpful to policymakers. An increased volume of research has taken place, and a plethora of estimates and figures on this matter have been produced. However, due to data limitation, there is still certain aspects of inequality, poverty, and deprivation that cannot be efficiently covered and investigated. This becomes more evident during the recent economic crisis, where information inequality and poverty has particularly crucial in setting and evaluating policies at national and EU level. In this presentation, we utilize Eurostat data, and we summarize some evidence concerning poverty and deprivation in the EU, and will briefly discuss certain data limitations and the potential challenges of working with data relating to poverty. Discussing the data limitations and potential challenges investigating poverty will emphasize in the following: income and poverty definition, time where the data refer, and comparability between countries and region and between time. In the analysis, we'll focus mainly on Eurostat, ECHP, and EU SILC data. Emilio presented these surveys. ECHP covered from 1995 to 2009, and EU SILC initiated in 2003 and is still going on. Now, time where the data refer. Well, one of the most one significant limitation is related to the year income data referred to. Now, in most countries, the data concerning income and consequently income poverty refer to the year previous to that of the survey. It is commonly assumed that published estimates of income and poverty refer to the year the survey was conducted, as opposed to the year the data actually referred to. Now, this may confuse researchers and policymakers who are not familiar with this issue. This creates difficulties in evaluating. It creates difficulties in evaluating responses to poverty measures, particularly during periods where the relevant figures change rapidly, such as during the current economic crisis. This is the case in Greece, where poverty rates increased enormously during the last 7 years. It is also hard to explain how the income and income poverty estimates are related to other social indicators, for example, employment status or education, that usually refer to the year of the survey was conducted. Well, it's one of the common mistakes you can see a lot of in a number of analysis on poverty is to associate, for example, educational level with poverty rates. But the poverty rate refers to the year before the survey is conducted, with the exception of United Kingdom and Ireland, as Emilio talked before. It's also, this is quite problematic when more complicated indices are calculated. This is a typical example of this common use index called poverty and social exclusion, that is based on information on income poverty that refers to the year previous to the one the survey was conducted, and the material deprivation and employment that actually refer to the year that the survey was conducted. This somehow could mislead the analysis. Another important issue is the delays in assessing the data. Well, I have to admit, there is a huge improvement on this matter. Now, still relevant to this, the delay between the date of which survey was conducted and the date when the data become available to the research and policymakers. Now, the most recent estimates, which is actually, if I'm not mistaken, came out the last month, refer to the 2017 surveys, which refer to 2016 incomes. Still, if I'm not mistaken, 2017 macro data are not yet available. This creates significant barriers to designing and assessing policy and intervention aiming to alleviate poverty and inequality. This is still more evident in countries where greatly affected by the economic crisis and where poverty has increased rapidly, like what happened in Greece, Italy, Portugal, Spain, and I suspect Ireland. Now, normally this was not a problem because poverty rates, before crisis, poverty rate was changing slowly a little between years. But what happened during the crisis in a number of countries, we have a rapid changes in poverty rates. Therefore, in this country where there are a number of policies implemented, well, for example, austerity policies or policies to alleviate poverty or whatever, and it's hard to evaluate the impact of these policies might have on poverty and inequality when the result is 2 years after these policies were implemented. Therefore, if we found a way to improve, to speed up or to reduce the gap between the date of the survey conducted and the data, the main figures will be available, will be great to the policy making. Now, I'll come to some other issue which is quite crucial and has to do with the definition of income and poverty used in these statistics. In these statistics, in this data, income is mainly defined as disposable income, that is the household income after direct tax and social security contribution. One should be questioning how comprehensive is this index in capturing persons' well-being. Well, we may add that estimates on pre-tax or gross income is also crucial in order to investigate the distribution of income tax and social security contribution, as well as to estimate the various aspects of the child economy. As Atkinson has pointed out, the before-tax income is more relevant as a measure of the status which a person has in one particular society, since it represents how a person is valued by the society in comparison to the other. Also, with gross income, one could have more accurate estimate on the contribution of each individual source to total household income, which is difficult to have it in net or after-tax income. Another problem is related to the narrow concept of money income used in these statistics. There is no information, for instance, on changes in the value of the capital and stock, information on production for own consumption, fringe benefit, imputed rent, and so on. Also, as Amartya Sen has pointed out, the extent of the real inequality of opportunities that people face cannot be readily deduced by the magnitude of inequality of income, since what we can or cannot do, can or cannot achieve, does not depend just on income, but also on the variety of physical and social characteristics that affect our life and make us what we are. Also, there is no information on wealth. Wealth is quite important in one's power over economic resources. The influence of wealth on a person's well-being and social and economic structure is crucial. Wealth provides feeling of security and the possibility of being less dependent on short-term opportunities for work. There is also reliable information on various income sources. This raises the question whether income from various sources can be weighted equally in analyzing economic inequality. The same applies to a number of how each person or has to spend on earning a particular amount of time from a certain source, of income from a certain source. Going to poverty. Poverty line is set as percentage, usually 6% of its country's median equivalent disposable income. Now, we have to question again how comprehensive is this index in capturing a person's well-being? What are the limitations imposed by this index on evaluating and comparing well-being and poverty? The use of this poverty index does not imply any superiority against the plethora of alternative ones that have been proposed in the literature. I mean, we have to bear in mind the typical poverty lines based on basket of goods or on subjective evaluations. Now, on the contrary, we could argue that this is a rather arbitrary index that lacks any strong theoretical foundation. Its advantages is that it could be easily calculated with the available statistics and could be easily understood by no expert. One of the main drawbacks is that it's quite problematic in uncovering and comparing the standard of living and poverty between countries on regions in different time periods. Now, some other issues related to the data is how we compare countries and regions. We'll first discuss issues in comparing income poverty between region and prefectures within a country. Well, there is huge, everybody knows there is huge variation in income and other socioeconomic characteristics between countries and regions. Due to anonymity reasons and sampling issues, there is no information for individual region and prefectures within countries. For example, in the information in Greece provided only for 4 large regions, that each of them incorporate other regions and prefectures with huge difference in income and other socioeconomic indicators. This places significant barriers to investigating poverty inequality between regions and prefectures and providing the necessary data and information for effective policy interventions. Issues in comparing income between countries. Household income and wealth varies considerably between countries. The definition of income poverty as percent of each country's median disposable income places serious limitations in comparing poverty and well-being between countries. A common to all countries' poverty line, based, for example, on a basket of goods, could help uncover and analyze the true dimension of the differences in the population standard of living and in well-being between countries. Differences in social provisions in kind have significant impact on people's well-being, and thus significantly affects the comparison on poverty between countries. Now, just to show you a few figures to see what's really happening in comparison in evaluating trends in time and comparing between countries. This is a figure on what happened in Greece, which gets affected greatly by recession and the implementation of austerity measures between 2008 and 2015. And actually, by 2015, I mentioned the year that the data refer, and not the year that the survey conducted. Therefore, the 2015 is the 2016 survey. Now, you can see that the blue line is the typical relative poverty, which is 60% of national is below 60% of national medium equalized income. You see that poverty increased from 19.7% to 2008 to 23% in 2011, and then gradually decreased to 21% in 2015. One might say, well, there is no significant effect of the crisis or of the austerity measures in Greece during this period, if you try to evaluate what happened in Greece with this index. Now, what really happened in Greece in this period? There was a significant reduce of median income, of household income, particularly those in the middle of the distribution, which affect greatly the poverty line. Therefore, poverty line in 2009 was for a single household was for one member household was almost 600 euro per month, which is reduced in 2015 to 375 euros. This is a decrease of almost 40%, 37% on income, which is not captured by poverty line. Now, of course, Eurostat is provided also a poverty line anchored in a certain year. If we use the poverty line, the 2008, based on 2008 survey household, we can see that poverty increased, and of course, based on PPS values, you can see that poverty increased from 18% in 2009 to 48% in 2013 and remains on this level. Therefore, with this although when with the relative poverty indicator who see nothing significant happen in Greece during recession, it will use the other poverty indicator that is anchored in a certain year, you can see that poverty in Greece, almost half of the population in Greece in 2013 lives in the same condition that were living the 18% of the population in 2009, which is enormous increase in poverty. Now, comparing poverty between countries, I'll present the figures that I had prepared in the past. What is the picture of inequality, of difference in poverty, if we use a common poverty line to all European countries? In this figure, we present we use the Danish poverty line, and of course we use PPS values in order to make comparable the estimates between countries. The countries are the 14 countries of the old 14 countries of the EU member. Ireland is excluded for this analysis, and they are just classified in welfare regimes. Just ignore this. You can see that if we use this classification, well, typical the differences between poverty rates. If we use national poverty lines, shows a difference between 12-13%. We exclude Luxembourg to 20-21%. All countries vary between these percentages, 12 to 20-21%. If we use a common poverty line, for example, taking the Danish poverty line, we see that, for example, more than half the population in Portugal and 40% of the population in Greece were living the same condition. They were living less than 50% of the population in most of other European countries. I mean, this figure shows that there is huge differences in the standard of living between countries that somehow cannot see this difference when you use typical poverty lines. We will use national poverty lines. Therefore, there is need for additionally to have a common poverty line, a common poverty threshold for all European countries, and then compare countries according to this common poverty threshold. Well, to add my presentation, I will just briefly summarize some potential challenges. Well, one is to investigate the contribution of various income components to inequality and poverty. It was quite important to see how various income components contributed to inequality and poverty. To analyze the distribution on household wealth and investigate its contribution on poverty dynamics and the reproduction of poverty. Well, one important issue here to say is how wealth can be contributed to in the generation transmission of poverty, for example. One important challenge is to reduce the time between the collection of the data and where the data are available. That is crucial for effective policy intervention. And also to examine distribution impact of social security system and its various components, as well as of other institutional macroeconomic factors on poverty and inequality. I will also add another issue, which is one information that is missing from this survey. Well, ironically, the most vulnerable groups of the population are excluded by these surveys. For example, those that are homeless, or for example, immigrants that are not living in typical dwellings, are not included in these surveys. Therefore, I mean, during a recession like happened in Greece, you have an enormous increase of homeless people, or due to the crisis in the Middle Greece, you have huge number of immigrants living in typical dwellings, in camps or whatever. This population are excluded by official statistics because this statistics is based on sample surveys, and the sampling, in order to be included in the sample, you have to live in a typical dwelling. Well, I'll finish here. Thank you.
Okay, great. So at this point, I'm just going to bring the webinar to a close. I'd like to thank both Emilio and Christos for presenting today.